In this video, we're going to be talking about the nav drawer. Now, the nav drawer is a user interface paradigm where we have a drawer, a navigation drawer that's off the screen that we can access by swiping in from the left to the right or selecting one of those infamous hamburger icons. Anyway, it's a very, very common, very modern approach to user interface, and I'm sure you guys have seen a bunch of examples of it before. So what I want to do is I want to show you guys how you can implement it in Android. Now, fortunately for us, Google includes a view group called Drawer Layout, which comes from the V4 support library, which happens to already be included in the standard application template that we get when we create a new project for Android Studio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how we can use the drawer layout to create a navigation drawer. And we're going to be using a navigation drawer in our application, of course, for navigation. So yeah, I'll talk about the sort of basic design guidelines of a navigation drawer as we move forward. But I want to go ahead and get an example going because it's actually really easy to do this. So my goal here is I want to create a nav drawer with or an application with two activities that we can switch between by using a nav drawer. So I want to put that together, and I'll show you guys how to do that, and it'll be awesome and stuff like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to call it nav drawer intro. Sure, why not? And then I'll place it into nav drawer info, or intro, not info. Intro, not intro. And that's good. All right, we're going to target 4.2. This choice is slightly significant. I'll point out why it is later. It has to do with the whole start, end versus left, right thing. We'll hit next. We're going to go ahead and start off with a blank activity. That seems like a sane thing to do. And this main activity, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change it. I'm going to call this inbox activity because it's going to, the way that I'm structuring this example, we're going to have two activities, an inbox and a contacts activity, kind of simulating what you would see in a email application. And we're going to go ahead and keep all of those things the way they are. I don't really care about the menu resource, but it'll create one for me anyway. All right, so it is doing its thing off screen, and there it's done. Okay, so it's still building, give it a sec. All right, so what I want to go ahead and do now is I want to go ahead just really quickly show you guys the nav drawer, the easiest way to implement one, and we're just going to do it right here, straight up in the activity inbox. So let's go ahead and get that implemented. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this text view. Then I'm going to go ahead and break up my attributes line by line because it'll make what I'm about to do a whole lot easier. Okay, so now we have our attributes cleaned up a little bit in a way that I like a lot more. I wonder if there's an option somewhere to change the default layouts of that, because I really hate it when multiple attributes are on the same line. Anyway, so now that we have all this set up, what I want to do is I'm going to remove all of the padding, because we don't want padding for what we're doing. And I'm going to replace relative layout with a completely different control. So remember how I mentioned the drawer layout. The drawer layout is the view group responsible for giving us the nav drawer type features in Android. And so I'm going to replace the whole top level view with the drawer layout. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to have a drawer layout anywhere other than the root of your layout. And the reason is that the drawer layout contains your actual rest of the layout, the stuff that is normally visible, and B, the navigation drawer itself. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Android dot support, remember I said it was in the support library, .v4, which happens to already be included by proxy from including our v7 app.compat support library, widget, or widget, I just like calling it widget because that's what it looks like it should be said, or it should be pronounced. Drawer layout, which is already shown up in my autocomplete. Okay, now we're going to get an error, obviously, because our start tag is a drawer layout, and our end tag is a relative layout. So we can fix this quite easily by taking this control, copying it, coming down here to the end tag and control Ving it. There's probably a keyboard shortcut that can replace the entire tag at once, both the beginning and the end, but I'm not aware of such a thing off the top of my head. Okay, so now you're going to get this. I don't know if this is a bug in Android Studio or not, but it has a really difficult time rendering a preview for the drawer layout. Now, this is actually possible to do, and you kind of have to finagle the solution a little bit, or the project a little bit, to get it to display properly. And I don't know if this is going to be fixed in a later version of Android Studio or not. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go the nuclear route, and I'm going to come up here to build, and I'm going to say clean project. Now, of course, what cleaning a build does is it gets rid of all of the build artifacts, including any intermediate build artifacts. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and say build, and I'm going to say make project. Could have probably just hit rebuild project. And we're still running into a slight issue. Now, the funny thing is if I were to launch this, I just want to prove to you guys that this is a problem with the preview window and not with what the code that I'm writing. I'm going to go ahead and hit play and select both my emulators. I'm going to be running Android 4 and Android 5 in this video. And you see, it does run. See, if that class wasn't found, we would get an exception right here, and it would be an error. So that shows that this error that we're getting is basically entirely in the preview window. And you don't want to hit create class. That's a bad idea. Creating a class will just create our own nav drawer, which will override the other nav drawer. And we have fixed build path, which shouldn't matter because our build path should be pointing to our Android SDK and all that fun stuff. So the way that I fixed this before, well, I'm going to try a couple things, and I'll be right back, because I had to finagle it a little bit to get it to display. I'll be right back. And I'm back. All I had to do was relaunch the Android Studio. I guess restarting things usually should be the first thing you should try. So next time I'll keep that in mind. Restart the solution, and you will have your nav drawer preview. By the way, our nav drawer preview is blank because there's nothing in it. So, like I said earlier, the nav drawer is composed of two parts. First, we have the actual background, the actual content of the activity itself. So what would have been in this activity if we didn't have the nav drawer? So answer that question. What would have been in the activity if we didn't have that nav drawer? Well, you saw before we had a relative layout with a 16 dp padding. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say relative layout with a layout width of match parent and a layout height of match parent. And then I'm going to go ahead and give it a padding of 16 dp so that it's similar to the relative layout we started with. And I guess I'm going to go ahead and just do a text view with the wrap content. Wrap content text is, this is our inbox. And go ahead and say center in parent is true. So basically all I did was make a relative layout and I put a centered text view in the middle of it. So far, this is not very exciting because basically we've accomplished nothing. We've accomplished nothing other than wrap our relative layout up with a drawer layout. So here's where the magic happens. Basically, what we can do now is after the relative layout, not before the relative layout. This is important. After the relative layout, we define what our navigation drawer should look like. And the drawer layout is going to pick up on that. It's going to say, okay, so it assumes the first element is your actual content, the actual content of your layout, and then it assumes that the second and or third element are your actual navigation drawers. So what I can do here is I can open up whatever element I want. So what do I want my navigation drawer to look like? Well, very commonly a navigation drawer, if you've seen one like in an email application or whatever, will show a list of buttons. So what's a great way to represent a list of buttons? Well, that's going to be a linear layout. So we're going to do a linear layout with a width of... now, this is important. So what's the width of our navigation drawer going to be? What does this control? I'm going to set this to 300 dp for now, and I'll point out how this affects our navigation drawer in a moment here. Then, for our height, I'm going to say match parent. Obviously, we want our navigation drawer to extend top and bottom of the parent. Okay, so inside of our... we, of course, also want to give the orientation of vertical. All right, inside of our linear layout, let's go ahead and specify our buttons. So let's do a button, and this button will have a width of match parent, a height of wrap content, and we'll go ahead and give it a text of inbox, and we'll go ahead and give it a ID of +/forward, or the @+ID /, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to give this an ID. This will look a little weird if you've been watching the previous videos, but bear with me. An ID of nav drawer inbox. Okay, so unfortunately I've already failed miserably. So we have our linear layout, we have our button inside of it, but we're missing one important thing that I wanted to go ahead and write this out first before I pointed this out. So basically, our linear layout can be placed on the left or the right hand side of the screen. So yeah, you have to tell the drawer layout which side of the screen you want your linear layout to be on. Otherwise, it's going to be overlaid onto the top of the activity, which isn't what we want. That's basically what our relative layout is there for. So how do we specify which side of the screen we want our linear layout to be on? Well, it's pretty straightforward. On our linear layout itself, we simply specify a layout underscore gravity, so an Android layout gravity. Now, gravity. Okay, apparently I can't spell when there's no autocomplete, so I will point this out. The Android layout gravity autocomplete will not show up in this particular circumstance. I'm not entirely sure why. It could have to do with the fact that they didn't annotate the drawer layout properly, or Android Studio just doesn't have built-in capability to recognize that we're in a drawer layout. But trust me, a layout gravity does exist as a property, even though it doesn't show up in the autocomplete window. Anyway, inside of layout gravity, what do we want to do? Well, we want to specify if it's on the left or the right-hand side of the screen. But wait, we are targeting Android for 2. Now remember earlier when I made this project, I said that depending on which version of Android we're targeting, things might become a little bit different in this video. This is where it matters. So like I said in an earlier video, if you're running Android 4.2 or above, you should never use the words left or right to describe where elements are placed. The reason that is Android 4.2 introduced a powerful layout direction engine that allows controls to be placed at the left or the right, depending on A, your intent as an author of the UI, and B, the language of the person's phone. So if you're familiar with Arabic, for example, that is a right to left language. They start on the right-hand side of the page, go to the left. So to be kind of consistent with that, certain controls in an Arabic, in an application that's localized to Arabic, will appear on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side, because that's how that language makes those connections. So basically, what you need to describe is your intent with your direction. Do you want it to appear at the start or the end? And then when this gets ran on a properly localized phone or tablet, Android will then say, okay, you wanted it at the end, so for an English, we'll put that to the right. Oh, you wanted that on the start? So in Arabic, we'll put that on the right. So yeah, stuff and things. Basically, all that to say, instead of saying layout gravity left to make this appear on the left, since we're doing Android 4.2, we're going to say layout gravity start. Okay, so now look what happens. So now our linear layout, our navigation drawer, is all the way over here. You can kind of see it's all the way over here. You can see it's all the way on the left-hand side, and it's invisible. And we can't see any of the content in it because it's not being rendered. That's not a big problem. We'll see a way to handle being able to preview our nav drawer very shortly here. Okay, let's go ahead and complete our navigation drawer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this button, I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, and Control-V. So I'm going to get 3 copies of this button. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the second button say something like contacts or address book, and I'm going to give it an ID of address book. Then for the last button, I'm going to say text equals logout, and I'm going to give it an ID of logout. Now, before I wrap up my navigation drawer for now, I'm going to do one more thing. I want the logout button to appear all the way at the bottom of the navigation drawer. So a really easy way to do that in a linear layout is to insert a empty null view that will push it from those 3 buttons down to all the way to the bottom. Unfortunately, you guys can't see this. Actually, I can make you guys able to see the preview by simply taking out this layout gravity start. So now you see our navigation drawer just momentarily. I'll put this layout gravity start back in before we hit play. But anyway, by putting in a view here, of width wrap content height match parent, and finally a weight of 1, now you see that this empty view is now taking up all the space of the linear layout and pushing that logout button all the way at the bottom. Now there's one last thing I want to do with this linear layout, and that is give it a color. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a color of something that I chose out of the Android, something I chose out of the Android color guidelines, and I'm going to come back up here to my linear layout and say background equals, and let's go ahead and make it semi-transparent by doing 4, 4 for the alpha component, E0, F2, F1 to give it a kind of teal color. Okay, so that's not even close to what I want. It'll be fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and introduce back my layout gravity. Equals start, and now it's over here on the right hand side. So you guys were able to visualize the navigation drawer, hopefully. So let's go ahead and hit play and take a look at how the navigation drawer is looking on our application, both in Android 4 and in Android 5. So it's going to be building here for a sec, but while it's building, let me get my virtual machines organized. Okay, so you're looking at the nav drawer, and there's no nav drawer, obviously, because it is off screen. So how do we make it on screen? Well, I said earlier that we're going to have a button up here to toggle it, but we haven't done that yet. However, there is already a way that's built into the drawer layout that'll make the navigation drawer visible, and that is swiping from the left to the right. So watch what happens. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to get over here to the left-hand side of the screen. I'm going to click and hold and drag out to the right. So now we have what'll happen if you drag out from the right-hand side of the screen. We have our navigation drawer. Now, it doesn't look all that great. Obviously, you can go in, you can style things, make things more consistent between operating systems and so on, but that's basically the general idea of how to put together a navigation drawer really simply. So let's go ahead and make these functional really quickly. Before we end this video and talk about how to integrate this into the ActionBar and Toolbar, let's go ahead and implement the functionality of our navigation drawer. It's actually going to be really, really straightforward. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to create a new class up here in my package, and I'm going to call it base activity. He is going to inherit, so extend, from ActionBar activity. Remember, that comes from the support v7 app namespace, or package, rather. Then what I'm going to do is I need to hook. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to implement all the functionality of my navigation drawer. So I'm going to go ahead and have it so that this hooks in and adds on-click listeners to the buttons inside of my navigation drawer. So how do I do that? Well, I can't override the onCreate method because this base activity, which I'm going to make abstract, by the way, so you can't instantiate it directly, is going to be the base activity for all my other activities. And he's going to contain that logic. But he can't do the onCreate method. He can't override public void onCreate bundle saved state, because if he does that, how the child class is responsible for inflating the layout, right? You know, like inbox activity, he's responsible for setting the content view. And the parent onCreate method is going to be invoked before this content view is created. And if the parent onCreate method is invoked before the child set content view is invoked, then you get there'll be no way for us to reference controls that were inflated in the base activity if we overloaded the onCreate method. Now, there's a couple solutions. We could introduce our own onCreate method and call that from within this onCreate method and maybe declare this as final. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to override another view, or another method, sorry. The other method I'm going to override is called onPostCreate. So let's go ahead and do that. Up here in my base activity, I'm going to say override, and I'm going to do protected void onPostCreate bundle saved state. And of course, the first thing I'll do is call into my parent onPostCreate saved state. And now I can go ahead and implement nav drawer logic. So what I can do is I can go ahead and introduce my click handlers for my nav drawer. So what do I want to do? I want to go ahead and have it to where if you press the inbox button, we switch the inbox activity. If you press the address book button, you go to the address book activity. And if you press log out, we'll get a toast message. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say find view by ID. And I'm going to say r.id.nav drawer inbox .set on click listener new on click listener. And then I'm going to say start activity new intent passing in base activity.this as the context and inbox activity.class as the class. Then I'm going to say finish. Now, why would I say finish here? Well, the reason is we are navigating horizontally. You don't want to be able to go to your address book and hit back and get back to your inbox. Unless you do, in which case don't call finish. But I think it would clutter the backstack and make your application a little bit more difficult to understand as far as the navigation goes. So instead what I'm doing is I'm implementing horizontal navigation, sibling navigation, where we jump from one activity to the other and we don't convolute our backstack. Next up, I'm going to say find view by ID, RID, nav drawer, address book, set on click listener, new on click listener. And here we're going to say start activity, new intent, base activity dot this, and then I'm going to say address book activity dot class. Now, address book activity doesn't exist yet, but we'll be creating that momentarily. Then I'm going to say finish. Finally, I'm going to say find view by ID, RID dot nav drawer logout dot set on click listener, new on click listener, and I'm going to simply say new toast, or sorry, toast dot make toast, passing in base activity dot this as the context, passing in logout, or you are now logged out as the message, and passing in toast dot length short as the length. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click my package, select New, select Activity, select Blank Activity. And I'm going to call this Address Book Activity. And hit Finish. And now we have our Address Book Activity. So now we run into a couple problems. First of all, let's go ahead and address the fact that inbox activity and address book activity do not inherit yet from base activity. Oh, and there we go again with me forgetting to invoke show on the toast. And thank you for that shout out, IntelliJ. Okay, so let's go ahead and make our inbox activity and address book activity inherit from base activity. So let's go into inbox activity, and instead of extending from ActionBar activity, extend from base activity. And then in our address book activity, instead of extending from ActionBar activity, extend from base activity. So now we have this logic being invoked on both activities. Now this logic is going to succeed and perform just fine in our inbox activity. But when we switch to the address book activity, we're going to get an error. Now, why would we get an error if we jump into the address book activity? Well, the reason is notice how we have our activity inbox that has our drawer layout and our navigation drawer, but our activity action book has neither. Our activity action book doesn't have a drawer layout at all, so it's in no way going to work. Now we run into a problem. Now I could very, very easily take all this code, copy it, and paste it right into activity address book. But that'll introduce a don't repeat yourself issue. Because now, if I did that, our navigation drawer will be repeated between our activity inbox and our activity address book, and we don't want that. So instead what I'm going to do is introduce an include. I'm going to factor out this linear layout for our navigation drawer, put it into its own layout file, and then include it from both the activity inbox layout and the activity address book layout. So to do that, I'm going to come over here to my, my layout folder, right-click, select New, select Layout Resource File, and I'm going to say include nav drawer. Then I'm going to open up the text of this. I'm going to keep the linear layout here, And I'm going to come back here. I'm basically going to go ahead and take all of these attributes, the layout width, the layout height, the orientation, the background, the layout gravity. I'm just going to copy all of those attributes. So I'm selecting all that, hitting Control C, and then I'm replacing all of the attributes except for the XML namespace. So the reason I just didn't grab the whole nav drawer and paste it in here was because I would lose my XML namespace Android. I do believe there's an alt-inner thing that'll magically make that reappear back, but I just decided to do it this way. So basically, take all the attributes, paste them over here. Now what I can do is take the contents of my linear layout, and I can just go ahead and cut these out. Hit Control X, come back here to include nav layout, hit Control V, and now you see our awesome nav bar is in its own file with its own preview. So this is handy for a lot of different reasons. Now that I've done that, I can come in here into the activity inbox, and I can replace this entire linear layout with a simple include statement. I can say include layout equals, and I can pass in include nav drawer. And it'll autocomplete to @layout/include nav drawer. Now, if you look at this, it looks exactly how it did before, with our nav drawer off to the side a little bit. All right, so to finish the first part of this example, I'm going to take the contents of activity inbox. I'm going to hit Control A to select everything. Then I'm going to jump into activity address book, hit Control A to select everything, and then hit Control V to basically copy and paste the entire layout from our inbox into our address book. However, I am going to make a couple changes. First of all, the tool's context is going to be set to address book activity instead of inbox activity. Second, our text view is going to say, this is our address book, instead of this is our inbox. All right, now I'm ready to go ahead and hit run. And we should be able to see our nav bar working. Our nav drawer working. So come over here, swipe to the right, and let's hit log out first. It says you are now logged out. Now let's hit address book. Our address book activity appears. Now let's hit inbox. Our inbox activity appears. So that's pretty exciting. And of course, when I hit back, notice how I exit the application entirely, which is the intended behavior. So now I can switch between my two items, inbox and address book, and I can hit log out. Now there's a couple problems here. First of all, these animations that we have are not what we want for this sort of navigation behavior, so that this sort of horizontal navigation. Also, we might want a little bit more control over when this navigation bar opens and exits. For example, when I hit back, it does close. However, when I hit log out, it doesn't close. Or when I hit address book, it doesn't close either. So there's a couple problems with it, some of which we won't address until we get into the app, because we're going to be implementing a very flexible navigation drawer system when we get into building the app. But some of them we'll address here in the next video. Anyway, I guess we will see you in the next video.